Left, right and centre, I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight on the show, the rage of the Indian middle class, from Anna to the anti-rape protests. Is middle class apathy over for real, or is it just superficial? Also, 127 years for the Congress party, but does it have anything to celebrate? But first tonight, the 23-year-old rape survivor flown to Singapore continues to battle for life. Doctors at the Mount Elizabeth Hospital have said in a statement today that in addition to her lung and abdomen infection, she also has a significant brain injury. A team of multidisciplinary specialists are doing everything possible to stabilize her. The girl had already undergone 3 surgeries here at the Safdarjung Hospital and even suffered a cardiac arrest before she was flown out dramatically 2 nights ago. NDTV Sonal Mehrotra is in Singapore and has more. We're coming to you from Mount Elizabethan Hospital here in Singapore, where the young braveheart girl continues to fight for her life inside the ICU under intensive care. The latest we know from the hospital and the doctors is the fact that along with her injuries and infection which spread in her lower abdomen and her lungs and the cardiac arrest which she had prior to being admitted here, they've discovered that there is a significant amount of brain injury. They say, and I quote, that she continues to fight for her life and she's fighting against all odds. But as we bring you the health updates, it's important to understand how, even in Singapore, the entire issue has found great resonance. Singapore is a country where a quarter of the country's population happens to be Indians. So great resonance across, something which is also reflected in today's newspaper. If I can take you through them. The Straits Times, one of the most popular newspapers of the country, has taken it at the front page news, talking about and reporting the anger and the outpour of this misjustice and the voice cry for justice which people have been crying out in India, and goes on in its lead inside the newspaper to talk about her current health condition. As all eyes remain on the health of the 23-year-old braveheart who is still struggling in the hospital right here in front of us in Singapore, lots of prayers pouring in, not just from India but also from Singaporeans, the locals here.
Our prayers, our mind, of Singaporeans here are with her. I would love to, say this to the father, to the parents. I look up to the parents because they are quite strong. Just pull through, stay strong. Gotta make it through.
No, I just feel for her. Yeah, we're very sorry for her, but just stay strong. Everybody is with you.
Well, over the last 10 days, there have been unprecedented protests and outrage here in India over the issue of sexual offences against women and the poor response of the government. The protests in Delhi and elsewhere have seen students, parents, young professionals take to the streets demanding justice. We first saw this phenomenon last year with Anna Hazare's agitation. Is India's middle class, infamously apathetic, finally waking up?
My body, my city, my right. The government is failing to understand the spirit of freedom.
He would have just come out with a speaker and a mic, spoke to the public, and tried to assure us that yes, we are trying to do something. We don't care. We will protest. We are protesting and we will keep protesting.
So is that awakening superficial or is it real? That's our big debate tonight. Joining us on the program this evening, we have Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, the CMD of Biocon, who joined us from Bangalore, Namita Bhandari, columnist, and one of those who has been leading the protests here in Delhi and has been getting people to sign up on a petition to demand justice and a change in India's rape laws. Sociologist and author Ashish Nandi is with us. Senior journalist and activist Vineet Narayan joins us tonight. We'll also be joined by Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, the Congress MP of the Rajya Sabha. Let me ask Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw first, that do you believe, from what we've seen, that there is genuinely the emergence of a new middle class that is agitated and that will not sit back and really comment in its living rooms anymore? If it feels strongly enough about something, people will come out.
Well, I think, like you said, we've been apathetic for far too long. I think people have basically come out onto the streets by saying enough is enough. I think, everyone needs to be very cognizant of the fact that issues such as the ones we are discussing right now can no longer be brushed under the carpet. You've just got to address these very serious issues, and women's issues have always been ignored for far too long. And I think therefore there is an urgent need to use this particular ugly incident to address these very serious issues, take action, legislate, and make sure that we look at all these very, very serious issues which are societal issues in a very serious manner.
Okay, so you do believe that it is a turning point as far as India's middle class is concerned. Namita Bhandari, Justice Markandeya Karchu, who's famous for saying a lot of things that people get agitated about, said actually about these protests, and I'm just quoting him, that these are emotional outbursts that will solve nothing. Anna Hazare's agitation lasted for 15 days, but corruption in the country hasn't gone down. Similarly, the hue and cry over rape notwithstanding, the incidence of gang rape will not dip even by 0.1%. We need scientific solutions and not emotional outbursts. How would you react to that analysis?
Did he suggest a solution? Did he suggest a scientific solution? I'd be interested to hear from him. Of course, I mean, it's stupid to imagine that overnight men are going to stop raping. The issue really isn't of rape, is it? It's of misogyny. And this is not going to disappear overnight. It's not going to disappear in 5 years, 10 years. But at what point do you say enough and let's start thinking about making a change? I think if we can say that, I think these protests have captured that spirit. If these protests have pricked the conscience of a nation, and maybe if we can even begin to think about change, we've made a beginning.
But there is criticism, Vineet Narayan, that much of the middle class's outrage, whether it is about the issues they choose and otherwise, is selective. It's selective outrage. It's, what affects people like us. We will not have these kind of protests if a horrible crime against a woman takes place in another part of the country, because this happened in the national capital and it was so brutal and horrific. We're out on the streets. Even in the anti-corruption agitation, there was a feeling that many had that there were double standards, there was hypocrisy, because the same middle class will still go and pay a 100-rupee bribe to a cop if they don't want a challan. So, do you believe it's selective outrage?
Well, I totally agree with that. This kind of reaction, very strong reaction, very vocal reaction, which is very much highlighted by the media, is an expression by those who are connected through internet, SMS, English-speaking audience basically. Common man definitely is concerned about the plight, his plight in the country, whether it is public distribution system, law and order, development of programs, other things. But he's not that expressive, he's not that organized, they're not so vocal that they come on the street. It's a selected kind of crowd which comes out and they express their thing, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's a good beginning. But the fear is that there is a difference between group and a mob. If there is a mob and a crowd, then there is total anarchy. You don't know whom to talk with, whom to negotiate with, whom to argue with. Crowd, takes to the violence.
But does it always need a negotiation and talk? Because I think what Namita was saying, that this was just an expression of frustration and anger. So
that doesn't need
it was a leaderless kind of a crowd,
Except that you underline the problem. You rightly said, like more than 100 Dalit women are raped every day in this country. Not even 3 cases are reported. And see, last few days I've been on channels, people are saying police is misbehaving, remove the police commissioner, all this. But how many of us have ever bothered to find out what kind of training a policeman go through? 1978 National Police Commission prepared its report of reforms. Till today, nobody has bothered to read that or push the government to implement it. How many of us have gone to the police training colleges to find out what is the curriculum?
I'll let Namita answer that about, this whole issue of selective outrage and the points that Vineet raised. How would you respond to that?
Well, I am a little sad actually that this entire protest, I thought that this protest could actually focus on women's issues and women's issues of safety. And as Kiran said, that when it comes to women, we always get sidelined. And even in this protest, we've seen how over the last 4 days, we've got distracted with a whole bunch of sideshows. We're talking about unresponsive governments, which is an issue, but it's not the issue over here. We're talking about the death of Subhash Tomar. We're talking about, we've just allowed this protest in a sense to be hijacked by a lot of extraneous, and I think we need to just refocus it back to the core issue.
Dr. Nand, how would you look at the protests right from Anna's agitation to now? Do you believe this is a genuine turning point?
You know, in any protest of this kind, particularly protest that is spontaneous and not very well organized, protest given the impression of being spontaneous, there will always be some bias. There will be always a bias against some women who get raped, but are not, cases are not reported. There will be always some kinds of corruption which do not make a newspaper headline. But nonetheless, the fact remains that there has been protest, and if any, under pressure, any new laws are enacted or new reform comes, that will equally affect the middle class and the Basta tribals and the northeastern women who have been protesting against central army presence. So there is that part of the story. Second point I would like to make in this context is this, that however superficial, however media oriented, however thin might the base of the protest, the fact remains that today in India, roughly 1/4 of the Indian population falls within the middle class. It's not anymore a small formation.
It's a big, and it's a big
very large
to deal with.
formation. Absolutely. And therefore, we have to get used to seeing middle class demands and middle class presence over the years more and more. And we should be prepared to handle also the style of middle class protest, which this present regime seems totally unable
to deal with. And I'll come to Dr. Singhvi on that in just a moment. I want to ask Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw though, that how do you deal with the contradictions of you know, the protests like these or movements like these? The fact that we were talking about perhaps the hypocrisy of the anti-corruption protests, but even on the anti-rape issue, 90%, at least statistics show that more than 90% of sexual offences against women are by people who know them. So the same people who are out there protesting on the street, is there a real effort to look inwards and say, you know, what are we doing, you know, in our homes, in the way we look at women, in our day-to-day lives? Do you really think there is a serious reflection on that?
Well, you know, Nidhi, first and foremost, I think it's a very deep-rooted malaise in our society. I think we need to really probe and introspect in terms of our whole attitude to women. And I think my main concern is this is a time when we should really look at, you know, see how we can basically improve women's status in society. I think every political party should look at this as an opportunity to actually come out with very good policies that actually improve women's status in society. We've always focused in a very sensationalist way in terms of various incidents that women have had to go through, whether it be, you know, women being beaten up in pubs, or whether it is about women being raped, or whether it is women being molested, or women being made fun of, or eve-teasing, or suicides on account of various incidents. But we never really bothered to look at this as a deep-rooted societal problem. I mean, as a woman, I can tell you that it always concerns me that we never seriously look at women's issues. And I think this is the time when every political party must basically include a women you know, policy in its manifesto. I think we have to look at how we improve women's
Sure, but the same Indian middle class that is looking for that political awakening, surely it must also look inward about what it has to do.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, it again goes back to societal problems, Nidhi. There is a deep-rooted societal malaise. You know, and that's something which we have to look at and correct. If we want to improve as a society, then we've got to do that.
I want to correct her impression. For nearly 150 years, all reform movements in India, all political movements of India emphasize the role of women and also the cause of women. It is only after World War II and after independence that this emphasis will begin to
Change.
And I sometimes wonder why it is so, and I don't understand. Perhaps the emergence of women as a major force in the job market, the emergence of women in different spheres and domains of life has made certain kinds of
Yes, the policies were great,
very
but women were
insecure.
subservient.
And women are no longer that subservient.
Let me just ask Dr. Abhishek Singhvi though about the question then of how does the political leadership then engage, with this agitated new middle class, because that clearly has been the biggest gap that we have seen, especially in the last 10 days, with the government on one side, the Home Minister saying, well, why should I go and talk to the protesters? Tomorrow you'll say that I should go and talk to Maoists, which I really don't see what the problem is, but he made that equation. So is the political leadership disconnected from this new reality of a middle class of young people, a young India that will be agitated about issues it cares about?
The political leadership is not political. They are basically technocrats and promoted bureaucrats.
I'll take that to Dr. Singhvi.
I don't quite agree, Nidhi. I think you have to separate the substance from the form. And I think also we tend to go a lot on form. And give me a couple of minutes because I've heard the previous panelists for some time now. I look at this as a vital form of public participation which deepens democracy. The ideal concept of democracy was the Athenian assembly, and since you can't have it in large nation states and large populations, you have now this new form of public participation, which is not all that new. In environmental hearings, in statutory public hearings, you require this kind of a public participation. When you increase the voting age to 18, when you lower the voting age to 18, you have public participation enhanced. When you have the Jan Lokpal, the Aam Aadmi movement, these are all new forms of public participation which are very good. And I think the political class has responded to them because you've had lots of changes occasioned by them. Now this latest one, there is however now a need to consolidate and to go away from mere optics and form into substance. I'll give an example. Today, while it is a very welcome form of deepening of democracy by public participation, you are making it far too trivial, far too media oriented. You react to the fact, now just take for example, in a situation of the current, the very inhuman and barbaric rape incident we have, as far as the police is concerned, really what can be expected is, one part is ex post facto, you can arrest, you've had arrests, you can have fast track court starting shortly, and I have no doubt there will be conviction in 3 to 6 months, which is a miracle in India. But then if you have lamentations every day on the basis of public participation, remove this police officer, call this accountability, did Tomar die of a heart attack or external object, we decide this on television, did the SDM report, is it correct or wrong, and don't wait for the Home Ministry inquiry, you then have public participation actually becoming obstructive. Because apart from the ex post facto punishment of these culprits, this public participation has led to many good things for the long-term future.
No,
it is going to lead to a change in law. One minute, only half a minute.
Yeah.
Verma Commission in 30 days, Usha Mehra Commission in 90 days, you're going to have concrete results. You have more policing on buses, you'll have more marshals. But that will all get lost and digressed if you do police bashing every day in the name of public participation.
Well,
you will actually obstruct and reduce the number available.
The fact that when on the first day you had students, young people, elderly people, people of all ages, basically between 15 and 80 out there, you had a complete disconnect with the political leadership. There was just no attempt to even reach out to those who were protesting there. And
How did he? How?
why did nobody spoke to them? Nobody talked to them.
No,
Are you disconnected? That's what I'm trying to say. That are you disconnected from a new middle class, from a new India that wants to engage with you, that will be agitated, that will come out when it's angry, and the political leadership is stuck in in the last century about how to communicate.
As I answer that question,
It's very obvious in the Home Minister's statement. He equates them with
the
Maoists.
Congress President and the Home Minister both met large delegations multiple times. That's actually true.
Sonia Gandhi met 4 or 5 people for a few minutes.
No, the Home Minister met in his office several delegations for 2 days. Well, let me just clarify, let me complete. Now it is true that this Akrosh, this angst is real, it's genuine. But they would want every time they gather in India Gate for somebody to come and engage with them. That may not be possible. And then there is an overreaction, partly because of the press, that this is not connecting. A lot of things which are happening there are because their concerns are being taken into account. The speed in which you see things happening is because legitimate concerns are taken into account. But you will not find every time a leader going out there and interacting with them. That cannot happen.
Why
and
not?
that's, I think,
Doesn't that
because it has happened already in some cases. It will not happen every day. It happened. For 2 or 3 days it happened.
Well, not in the way that many would see as being effective. But I'll take that to Namita, who wanted to ask you something.
Well, I'm glad steps have been taken. I welcome the Verma Commission. We have still many demands which haven't been met. And my question is that would you have even made these small beginnings if we hadn't been out there on the streets? If we hadn't been protesting, if we hadn't been demanding?
Absolutely right.
No, Dr. Singhi, it took 24 hours.
That is why I'm saying. Namita, I must add here.
Yeah.
I am saying this, that is the deepening of democracy, the response time in the arrests of 4 people in 1 week, the sure shot fast track court starting next week, the sure shot conviction happening in 6 months, are because of the urgency and the pressure and the legitimate concern shown by these people. I have no doubt in saying so.
Thank you. Yeah.
But I am saying a point comes when that becomes negative and obstructive. Beyond the point, but the last 4 days of those last 10 days may have turned to be more obstructive than constructive.
But the water cannons and the tear gas came on the first day.
Dr. Singhi, I want to ask you that you're absolutely right that if you go beyond a point, then you interfere with the functioning of the administration. But do you expect this kind of pressure to continuously be exerted in the government? Today it is a case of rape, tomorrow it is a public distribution system, day after tomorrow it is misgovernance. Now, do you expect people always to come on the street, exert pressure and continue to exert pressure in a civilized manner? Or is there, just a minute, or is there going to be a new process of dialogue? The other day I was with Home Minister when these demonstrations were going on. And I said, look, it's very interesting, it's very funny that every time this kind of thing happens, you people think that it is a target, you are the only target. I mean, Congress alone is not responsible for rapes in the country. I said, why can't you invite other party leaders, make a delegation of people, women and parliamentarians, send them to the crowd and have a dialogue?
Young MPs, I've been saying this from day one. I don't know why Rahul Gandhi, our youth, our so-called youth icon, Mr. Rahul Gandhi has been missing from this. I wish he had gone to India Gate. What I'm trying to say, Mr. Singhi, is that, isn't it time for governments to reach out to people? Doesn't the equation need to change? There's a larger point that we're stressing on here. That the way the relationship is conducted has to change.
Not only in wartime, even in peacetime.
Even in peacetime, yes.
They think it is beneath their dignity to go to the people.
Over the last year, the pace and direction of changes in several spheres, whether it is Lokpal, whether it is anti-corruption crusade, whether it is bilateral black money treaties, anti-black money treaties, whether it is the speed in which the arrests have happened now, whether it is the better policing and certain structures which will undoubtedly be in place within 30 days to 3 months now, all this is linked to the natural correct outpouring. And I think that's both good and largely good, little bit bad for democracy. Democracy means these impulses must flow. The bad part is only when the sense of balance is gone. Virtue is always something in between, each of the extremes of vice. And I think when the sense of balance is gone, whether it is gone by lumpen elements joining the genuine crusaders, whether it is upset by violence intruding where there is no place for violence, after all, Tomar's life is no less precious than the life of any of us. So these are issues which you have to, it's all a question of balance. And this public participation, you have to define the public. The public must be the genuine public. Whether it is middle class, lower middle class, sometimes it is not the public. There are people out there.
Because I think what Ashish Nandi is trying to say here is that this was largely apolitical. At least it started out that way. You didn't have political parties.
Exactly, I agree.
Yes, right? I mean,
what do you mean by genuine? How can you control? How can you demand of a movement that it produce genuine protesters? I mean, that's absurd.
That is the only way to define it, is when they do not get violent, when they keep talking constructive.
But the water cannons,
they simply
gas was used before they turned violent.
Look,
I'm just
It is
talking
so.
about basic communication, and it's not just with protesters. I
Some
think
of
it's
them-
just with between the political leadership and the people. Kiran Shaw, I take
don't
last
think
comments
it's
on
right
this.
to-
Do you think that the political leadership is communicative enough on anything? Honestly?
I think it is very true that none of the political parties, except with a few exceptions, are really communicating and messaging to the people at large what their policies are, what their view on matters is. I think they have to be far more proactive, they have to engage far more, they have to communicate far more effectively with the people at large.
All right. Let me take last comments then, Namita.
I'm willing to concede this much to Dr. Singhvi that yes, beyond the point, the protest doesn't have but I'm also saying that not enough has been done. Not enough. We want pending legislation. For instance, there are 2 pending legislations, including the Criminal Amendment Bill of 2012, which has been pending for 7 long years. We need confidence-building measures from you. We need a signal from you that you are listening to us, that you are taking us seriously. And I don't want to go back into the past. Did you listen seriously to start with? Why did it take 24 hours? I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying, please do listen to our demands. And these are legitimate demands. We are trying to help. Let's work together. Let's work together.
Well, I think that, to be fair to the government, at least those small steps,
Yes.
like the database they talked about yesterday,
Yes.
the fact that this commission has 30 days within, and Justice Verma is looking at that, and those are small changes, but I think the question still remains, does the political leadership know how to engage with this new middle class? I think that's a question that still remains. Yes, Dr. Singhvi.
Just one sentence. The small, the big, the medium, they will also culminate in the budget session, where I can almost give a guarantee that the product of 30 days and 60 days, at least large parts of it will be legislated into enhanced punishments and better anti-rape laws. That's why it syncs with the budget session. But these things take time, they don't happen in less than 60 or 90 days. And secondly, when you're talking about communication, yes, to the extent there is always scope for improvement, I agree. But let me tell you that the communication today is far more intense, far more continuous, far more 24/7, and apart from anything else, you people ensure that. Do you think anybody, be it civil society, government, apolitical, political, NGO, can we stay away from your 24/7 or omniscient, omnipresence thing? Communication is there everywhere.
Well, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi broke her silence after 12 days today on this story. After 12 days, Sonia Gandhi spoke. We have still not actually heard from Rahul Gandhi, who I again said is supposedly our youth leader, about what he has to say on this gruesome case. It's not just about this case. There's a lot of anger. So I'm not talking about you. You're kind enough to come on TV every day. I'm not even asking them to come on the show. I'm saying, please, we'd like to hear what you have to say at the very least. I'd like to thank Namita Bhandari and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw for joining us. And continuing with this theme, today was the 127th Foundation Day of the Congress Party, and Sonia Gandhi and the Prime Minister there both spoke about the rape survivor in their remarks, saying that the guilty would not be spared.